It's another edition of Riding Home. Dylan Webber, Dean Legge here in Athens as we get right on top of the SEC championship game. It's Tuesday night. What'd you see at practice that I missed? Maybe these last two.
Did you see?
I basically just watched the defensive backs.
Did you see the first throw that Justin Fields made?
Yes.
That was insane. I probably should have been a touchdown.
Yes, he dropped the ball, right, at the end there.
And, so it was about a 44-yard pass on the run across his body.
He was going to his right, and he threw it across the field to his left.
And it was just a dime to Tyler Simmons.
Who dropped it.
Yeah, just straight up dropped the pass. That was the first thing I saw, and I was like, "Oh."
Well, it was hard to miss that. Hey, let me ask you this. Go ahead, you can drink your coffee.
No,
it's very cold outside.
Yeah.
It's 40-something degrees, which is no big deal, but the wind.
It was like 38 when I got up this morning.
The wind.
I almost didn't go to class.
We got to work on the wind. Is Vince Dooley there that often, typically?
Yeah, he's been here pretty often this season. I think this week probably.
This week he's been around all the time.
He's usually at the Monday press conferences.
Right. No, I mean at practices.
At practices, no.
Yeah, so he's been at 2 practices in a row, which is interesting. It's not really that big of a deal to me, but
yeah, I think it's just kind of something that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now at a Jack Davis cartoon of Vince Dooley, and Vince, of course, the last coach to win the national championship here in Athens, but this game continues to creep up closer and closer. It is hard to. Georgia really is got a fight on their hands here. This is similar to what they, in terms of point spread, and Fletcher Page telling me I'm getting too hung up on the point spread, which is fine. But in terms of point spread, this is about like the LSU game in 2011, which, mind you, they had a lead in the third quarter but lost. They've got a real task on their hands here this week.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, it's not. In practice, it's not frantic. It's not.
Practices look the same as they always do.
It's not even like they're laser focused or anything into it. They just seem comfortable. They seem confident. They seem like you said. It just seems like another game to them, really. And of course, they don't think that. They know it's not just another game.
I think the whole campus knows, and the Georgia people understand how monumental this is. I wonder how many of them think, and we talked about this maybe too much yesterday, but I wonder how many of them realize that they may have to beat Alabama twice to win the national championship.
I don't even think that's what they're like. They think.
I'm talking. Well, let's you and I talk about it just for a second. Let's not get. I'll try not to go 5 minutes on this. If Georgia beats Alabama, does Alabama get in?
It all depends.
No. I need a yes or no.
No, I say no.
So you think Oklahoma will a win by Oklahoma knocks Alabama out?
I think so. Just because I feel like because the playoff committee changes each year on kind of what they say is like what they're looking for, and a
non-conference champion has gotten in several times, a couple of times I should say.
Yeah, but I think the argument that Oklahoma goes with is say we beat everyone that we've played. I think that's just the biggest argument they have.
And a lot of it will depend on what the score is for Georgia. I mean, do they win by 10 points or do they hold on and win?
Yeah.
Hold on and win is, I'm not sure. We were talking earlier on Dog Post about this. If you don't go to Dog Post, you should. DAWGPOST.com. If you're in your car, keep your hands on the steering wheel.
Wait till you get home.
Yeah. But I don't know if Georgia and Bama both arrived at this game undefeated that the loser would go this year. They would have needed Oklahoma to lose another game or Ohio State to lose another game or something. We are not at the conclusion of this season, so we still don't quite know what reality will be about this time on Saturday. But it's just hard to see a conference championship loser getting in. I mean, that's never happened before. We've never seen a conference championship loser.
We've seen a non-division winner get in.
Totally, but the committee has always seemingly been, to me, somewhat a prisoner of the moment. Now,
Absolutely.
They weren't last year, I guess you could say, but ESPN's power in this is significant. Tonight we will see really who benefits. I mean, like if Oklahoma is in front of Ohio State, it's hard to see Ohio State getting in front of Oklahoma for the final spot if Georgia loses.
I will never doubt, though, the ability for Ohio State to sneak in. I still just
they're gonna need a real big ability.
They need a lot of help.
I mean, because it's hard to whitewash. I still remember watching that game where they lost to Purdue.
That was awful. It was so bad.
That would Georgia lost to LSU by 20 points.
Yeah.
LSU's a ranked team.
Yeah, and one that was in the top 10 now for like weeks.
The bulk of the season. Yeah. I'm not making fun of Ohio State right now. I don't know. Is Purdue ranked? I don't think they are.
So.
Yeah. So I mean, like last year, Clemson lost to Syracuse, a team that wound up 4-8, and got into the playoff. But Clemson was, I think it was a slightly different situation. Wouldn't you agree? Clemson actually wound up as the 1 seed
with a loss
to 4-8 Syracuse. And there were some built-in excuses there. They were playing. If this is not really an excuse, they were playing on the road. Okay, so it was Ohio State. Clemson lost their starting quarterback in that game. Okay,
Still 4-8 Syracuse.
Still 4-8. Shouldn't happen. Whatever. It's going to be hard for me to see how both Oklahoma and Ohio State get into this thing. If Georgia wins, I think it really becomes problematic for both of those teams because then you've got the variable of Alabama. And by the way, is there any scenario where Georgia is the 1 seed? There is not, right?
No, because Notre Dame.
But does Georgia at 12-1 jump Notre Dame?
They should, do they? I don't think so.
It'd be curious then which would be the home. Would it be Miami for Georgia then too? For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, would they go? If did I just say if Clemson loses?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty unlikely. But if Georgia's the 1. Notre Dame would have to be the 2. Who is the 3? And there's just no way that they would set Alabama and Georgia up again in the second game. That would be bizarre. How does this offensive line for Georgia deal with an Alabama front that's pretty good? Like, obviously, their front line is up there. I mean, the linebackers are maybe not what they have been in the past.
You got to lean on them. You just have to. Georgia, the offensive line, I'm not too worried about. In fact, I think Georgia has to be able to run the ball in this game, and I'm not concerned with the offensive line in that regard as much.
Who are you concerned with, the running backs?
Not really. I'm not really. I don't.
The running backs at Georgia have been. They're not as good as last year's. Okay, they've been as productive.
No, yeah, I'm not. I think they'll be able to run the ball against them.
If they can run the ball. This game is not quite this 13-point line that is being made out to be, to me.
No, it'll be a way closer game.
That's
the crucial part of this game, I think.
If Georgia doesn't run or chooses not to run, they will lose.
Yeah.
Significantly, I would say. How if you're Georgia's defensive group, do you hold up to what Alabama will do running the ball, not throwing it?
That's a huge concern. Just because the depth on the defensive line has been an issue. For weeks now, they've been rolling long snappers at scout team for defensive line because they just don't have enough guys.
The thing about it is that everyone should remember in these two sort of classic matchups between Bama and Georgia in the last 6 years is Alabama won those games within the last 3 minutes of games with long passes. With 50 and 40-yard touchdowns. That's how they've won. They've done it on play-action pass. Well, and I guess in 17 that might not have been a play-action pass, but certainly was in 2012. So Alabama's physicality has led to a pass down the field. This is a Georgia-centric podcast, so the question is for everyone on YouTube and so forth is, what happens if Tua has a rough day/night? What happens if... when you throw the ball, it used to be that only one good thing could happen, but 2 bad would happen, which is an interception or an incompletion. What if there's 2 interceptions from DeAndre Baker, arguably a top 10 NFL draft pick prospect? What happens if Alabama isn't what they are through the air? we were talking about the strengths that Alabama has, which they have many. What happens if you have? It's hard to have an off day running the ball. Passing, that's a different situation.
Passing is like much more likely because it's just.
I mean, Duke gets upset when they get upset in the tournament because they shoot a bunch of threes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just you just get agitated, and when you're not making your shots, when you're not making your throws, when you're not making your shots, it gets agitated.
It can build.
Yeah, and it's just that frustration builds and builds, and it's hard to overcome that, especially for guys this age.
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing that a buddy of mine who's tied in pretty well says to me, that Bama just hasn't had an off night yet. What happens when they have an off night?
And
do they have the capability to recover? Yes, I think they do.
I mean, yeah, but
it's a lot easier hitting forehands and making layups than shooting threes.
Yeah, and they do. They absolutely have the capability of it because, I mean, these guys are ultra talented. But they haven't been in a circumstance where they've had to. So
they've not been pressured late. Georgia really hasn't either, though, this year.
Yeah, but they've had. I mean, they had the LSU game where they had an attempt and they failed.
Well, they were losing to Florida in the second half.
True, but I mean, they came out and just kind of started to stomp them there.
It's just does Georgia have the diversity on offense to switch gears?
Yes, but the run game has to be there because
what happens if the run game's not there for Alabama? They can just throw it. Can Georgia turn that switch on? They can't like Alabama can.
They can't.
It's not the same.
Because Tua is more dynamic than Jake is.
No question.
He can scramble out of the pocket and extend plays and Jake can too to a certain extent, but not to the way Tua can. And so that opens up the passing game when the run game isn't there much more to Alabama.
My old friend Dustin Lucky, I'll name drop. My old friend Dustin Lucky, when we were in school at Georgia in grad school, would say to me all the time. He was a defensive guy. He'd say it's really hard to go 80 yards. He said 40, 30 yards, anybody can score touchdowns. He said 80 yards, drive the length of the field. He said that's really tough to do. He said it's hard to do it. He said, and so that leads me to this question, which is, are Georgia's kicking units, punt and kickoff return, or a kickoff defend, are they ready to have a really solid game with either no return yards for Alabama because of, situations, or, not allowing a big play? Both these teams can have big plays in the return game.
I'll say the kickoff, I bet, will be, just because, Rodrigo will try and kick it out of the end zone each time, and if he doesn't, they will be ready because they gave up that one to Georgia Tech, and Kirby is not. I almost guarantee he has probably put so much emphasis on making sure that doesn't happen again. Because, I think.
Well, they'll lose a game if they. It's very rare that a non-offensive touchdown is scored and you don't win the game. Georgia Tech was slaughtered, but if that were someone else, if that were Auburn, Florida. Sort of a more traditional power.
It just changes the game.
Changes the game dramatically.
So
Georgia was up 14-0 or 21-0.
At that point,
it was 14.
I think they were only up 14.
So the game became back in doubt all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens this weekend, that's a problem. Last year it wasn't a special teams play, but when Georgia had control of this game completely, it felt like. And when the Jake Fromm interception happened, when it bounced off the kid's helmet, that changed the game. It was a combination of that and I think Tua that changed the game. And I think Alabama scored on that drive. If they didn't, it felt like they did. And that was the catalyst.
For some reason, I feel like they...
It might not have,
but the momentum had changed.
Georgia could have ended the game.
You could feel it in the stadium.
Yeah, Georgia could have ended the game.
It's just it might not have been that Georgia or Alabama took that momentum and completely made it their own, but Georgia had so much at that point because it just seemed like they were in complete control, and at that point it was like, well, maybe they're not. They are.
And that's the thing to remember about Bama. In 12, when Alec took that ball back for the touchdown, I think Georgia got up either 8 or 11. I think it might have been 11, and they lost that game. They lost that game because of the surge in the fourth quarter from the Tide. And partly because Georgia couldn't get off the field on defense. They finally did, right when they needed to, and Aaron nearly saved them. But in the second half of this game that we're talking about, Alabama really surged. They're champions. They're going to – you are not just going to beat them. You're going to have to earn it, period. You're not going to get any – the referees are not going to take care of you in this game.
Every single yard. I mean, and I feel like that's overused.
No, it's true in this case.
But in this game, every single yard will have to be earned. You won't have Alabama
on both
won't
sides.
They won't just give you yards really.
No, and this matchup, we talked about it yesterday before Mark came in and interrupted our flow. But this,
I wouldn't say interrupted. I'd say joined.
Joined our flow. This game is going to... Georgia folks are going to have to get used to this matchup.
And Alabama fans will too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Everyone talks about Clemson, Alabama playing over and over again. And they have played 3 years in a row. But Georgia and Bama are directly in front of one another. Clemson and Bama both have to do a little arithmetic before playing one another, and it has to just work out. It almost didn't work out last year. Alabama snuck in. Clemson could have been playing Ohio State.
Yeah.
And played Georgia for the national championship instead of it being Alabama. So these two teams this is going to become commonplace.
Yeah, it's much...
Well, I would say that. I don't know. What's going to change? A&M?
It's hard.
LSU? It's hard to envision that.
Of course, it's hard to look 2 years in the future and say.
Yeah.
But, this year, obviously, and next year, seems pretty
Not
clear.
much changes next year.
Yeah.
Now, Alabama will lose some kids. Georgia will lose a couple, right? They'll lose DeAndre Baker.
That's a big loss.
For sure. Ledbetter. That hurts. Which other seniors? You could lose Rodrigo. You lose Terry Godwin.
Yeah.
You could lose Mecole Hardman.
You could lose Tyler Clark.
You could lose Tyler Clark, Rodrigo. You could lose Mecole.
DeAndre Walker.
Well, DeAndre Walker leaves.
That's a big loss.
That's a big loss.
But that one...
DeAndre Baker is the one that...
DeAndre Walker, I don't want to say is replaceable, but is easier to replace.
Than Baker,
with what
for
they
sure.
have.
Oh, no question.
D-Bake is, just been a generational player.
The thing about it is, I saw Tyson Campbell today at practice, and Mel Tucker was he was coaching him hard.
Yeah, no, I wrote about that a little bit. He was very detailed in what it was. Something it was just about which hand to use, and where to place it, how to place it.
And the thing about it is, I remember this. It does look like the guys are going real fast, but when you're out there, you do have to think about what you're doing. What I mean to say is, you don't want to think too much, but you should be able to put your hands and or feet the way that they're supposed to be. That's the point of practice.
It's not all instinctual.
No, it can't all be instinctual, or you're going to have some problems. I remember having to learn, in basketball, the way we did it in college was the exact opposite of the way that we did it at Tucker, and that took a long time to get used to. We did regular pivots at Tucker, whereas at Coker it was called a reverse pivot because Coach wanted us to open up to the basket completely. It took a little time to get used to that. For these guys, Tyson Campbell is basically, for me, it would be like late January in basketball my freshman year, and I still didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, it was hard.
Well, yeah. I think people they've kind of shit on Tyson Campbell a little bit,
a little too much.
And he hadn't played well. He was not doing well. LSU, he got straight up used in that game, but. He's a freshman.
Right.
Being a freshman corner, especially
a
corner opposite of DeAndre Baker, is hard to do.
But he will be one of the guys, him or Stokes or...
I think Stokes will probably be the starter, but
I'm talking about next year.
Yeah. Those two, Mark Webb are going to...
Mark Webb looked good to me today.
Yeah,
his foot, the way he can move quickly... They have loaded up guys in this program. That's it. That's all there is to it.
In such a quick amount of time, too.
Well, yes, but...
I mean, just think, offensive line specifically. Look at the difference between 2016 and right now.
And that makes me think, too, about what, a win for Georgia in this game would change the narrative for a while. It would be no longer Alabama's dominant. People will still say that, and it would still be true.
Yeah, but they won't be the kings of the SEC, even though Georgia won.
Well, I mean, shit, if Georgia wins back-to-back SEC championships, Alabama hasn't done that in a while, a couple of years, 14 and 15. So that's not that long ago. But
to them.
Well, excuse me, 15-16, right? Didn't they beat the Gators' brains in a couple of times? But
it was Jim McElwain.
Right, winning it in back-to-back is always fresher in your mind when you've just done it. But nationally more, it would be like, who is this that's coming around? LSU has not recruited like Georgia, period. Clemson has recruited well. They've recruited better than LSU, but they've not recruited like Georgia has these last 3 years.
No.
There's been 3 schools, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson, and it's been those 3 schools. See, and that one of them is directly in your way. It's going to get real interesting in 2020 if things change, because then you're talking about they play in the regular season. They can't both arrive undefeated then. We've not seen, if of course, Bama didn't show up last year, and the year before that, Georgia wasn't what they are right now. But we've not seen a 5-year war here in this league in a while. It's been since the early 90s where Bama and Florida both, fought one another pretty hard, and Florida got the better edge of that one.
I mean, if you look at it right now, it looks very clearly
that's what it seems like.
The next 4 or 5 years, not easily, but very likely.
That's what it looks like, because the West path is tough and everything. It is, but the East, it just, unless it's Florida that comes up quickly and starts recruiting. I mean, like, they got to get in the top 20 in recruiting.
Where they at right now?
I think 21 or so. That's not going to work. 15 ain't going to work.
No, not
in this league.
Not with these 2 teams right now.
Right. I mean, LSU. I mean, Oregon, I think, is in the top 5. Texas A&M is, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, Texas A&M may be the threat. Maybe it is Texas A&M.
It all depends how Jimbo works out, because that's still a little unclear. Because right now 8-4 with
you
them.
can't give away games like they did to Auburn.
No, you can't. But it's their first year. It's the first year with
That's
them.
right.
And they have a lot of talent.
Georgia gave a game away in 2016 for sure with Vanderbilt. No question. They gave that game away.
Really
that was
badly
bad.
so.
That was bad. The same way Texas A&M though was with Auburn this year. Texas A&M, if Jimbo and them recruit at the level that is, the way that they are right now, / Kirby and Nick and Urban have, then you're talking about a team that can challenge. What I wonder about Jimbo, though, is the way things fell apart at Florida State was not ideal.
Oh, it was bad.
And until he gets a quarterback in there,
yeah, Kellen Mond's not going to do it.
He's got an issue. Here, Kirby didn't walk into a situation he walked into it with Eason, and then he got from and got Fields. Quarterbacks have not been an issue here. At Alabama,
there's always there seems
at Texas A&M, there's do you have an elite quarterback?
There seems to always be an elite quarterback prospects in Atlanta, several, and Kirby seemed.
Well, why couldn't Trevor Lawrence have gone to Texas A&M?
Could have.
Or Tennessee, or that's the difference. I mean, Clemson would not be where they're at right now without Trevor. They may well have been undefeated.
With Kelly Bryant?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're
right. But they wouldn't be a true threat to win the national championship with him, I don't think. It's going to be tough enough for everybody as it is, but with Kelly Bryant as your guy, that's not ideal. And if LSU's going to go get Kelly Bryant for next year, that doesn't solve the riddle for beating Alabama. You've got to have a playmaker or quarterback.
And not just a playmaker, like a dynamic.
A playmaker or quarterback. And Jake Fromm proved last year, at the end of the year, I can do this.
SEC championship,
Rose
Bowl, national championship. I mean, he was on a whole new level from what he has.
And he's going to have to play like that.
I mean, but he's been insane so far, like these past.
Well, he really didn't play well against LSU.
No, that was bad.
Really, 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 really bad.
That was really bad. But I mean, after that, each game
he's played well.
He hasn't done anything like this just ridiculously crazy, but he's played just...
The one interception against Auburn was just a bad throw. It was a throw to the inside. And guys are allowed to make mistakes physically. That's what that was.
I mean, you're not going to be perfect. But
well,
I mean, he'll have to be damn near perfect.
You would think Tua has been much of this season. And there are throws Tua can make that it's just you don't see him every day. So he'll be a number 1, 2, or 3 NFL draft pick when he goes. But in this particular game, Georgia's going to have to figure out how to stop him. Or, to slow him down, at least to some degree. And maybe it's sit on the ball. Maybe if you're Georgia, you say, you know what? We're going to try to win this game in the 20s. We're not playing this 40s shit. You realize Alabama has only scored fewer than 50 points. I think it's
4 times.
It's 4 times, 4 times this season. That's legit. It's hard to score like that, man. It's hard to score points like that. All right, tomorrow we will figure out even more. We'll have all sorts of answers for y'all. Thanks for listening to Riding in the Car with Dean and Dylan here on Dog Post. We'll see you tomorrow.